Hi guys, epicseven has just announced their balance patch preview, and with it, there are honestly a pretty cool number of characters here. I've already taken a look at them. They are for honestly characters I think that do need some love, and with it, let's get into it. The list is Pirate Captain Flan, Closer Charles, Archdemon Shadow, Eligos, Chloe, Yufine, Sinful Angelica, and Sigurd Scythe alongside an offer you can't refuse. Apologies. All these characters honestly need some sort of love in some way, shape, or form. So beyond anything else, number one, good job, Smogate. 7 or 9 for 9 in terms of being hit on characters or artifacts that actually need some love is a dub for me. Let's get into it though. Pirate Captain Flan is no longer receiving what she had in the past, and now what they're changing her or her kit to have now is stealing 1 buff guaranteed, or 100% chance on her S1. In addition, when she's attacked, she decreases damage suffered by 30%. And after an ally attacks, if the target does not have a buff, you activate Hunt, and Hunt increases the morale of all allies, increasing combat readiness by 15%. This is obviously a much different kind of feel to what we had formerly, or the whole controversy around whether or not Pirate Captain Flan's former variation would have worked or would have been good or not. It is what it is. They're changing Pirate Captain Flan to make her feel a bit better in terms of quality of life for what she has right now. I do think that being guaranteed to steal a buff is pretty cool. Well, guaranteed, but having 100%. And in addition, I do think that, well, just having the damage reduction does feel pretty cool. However, they did remove the Aureus effect, so I guess you could now pair Aureus alongside her to make it work. So in a sense, she's more tanky like this. But honestly, for the Hunt edition, where now if an ally attacks and they don't have a buff, you can activate Hunt. This Hunt, this 15% increase combat readiness is probably helpful, I guess, if you want to activate with someone else on the field. But honestly, since it's only activatable once every 3 turns, this is likely going to be a pairing or a setup that is exclusive or directly, or I guess like setup specific to Afternoon Soak Flan alongside, well, Pirate Captain Flan. Now, again, I've heard a lot of people comment like, oh my god, why do you keep talking about Afternoon Soak Flan? Well, she's the most popular character in the game, guys. I apologize. She's obviously in every single team composition, and from what we're seeing for basically every single character that we've seen recently, she's also designed, or she's being designed around and against currently, and you'll see that later with Eligos too. But my initial thoughts about Pirate Captain Flan is that this is nice. I guess she's a little bit tankier, and it's nice to have some of the quality of life here, but it feels as though currently she's just being buffed for her limited variation, or to be paired with her limited variation alongside, well, I guess taking a little bit less damage. Now, the Closer Charles thing is really funny because what they decided to do was they gave him healing or, lifesteal on his heavy S1 attack, and they also gave him evasion at the start of the battle. Now, I know what you're thinking, like evasion at the start of the turn, or at the start of your first turn, or at the start of the battle is pretty cool. And when I initially read this, I was like, oh my god, now he's, some Remnant Violet thing where he gets to deal a load of damage with S1, but he also gives combat readiness. It's at the start of battle. So that means for 1 turn and 1 turn only, you have evasion. Now, again, to be absolutely clear, I do think that this is very cool and is honestly nice so that someone like Closer Charles, can sometimes maybe evade the Zeo S3, or maybe you could evade something like a New Moon Luna S2, or maybe you could evade like an Assassin Sid S3, but a couple issues with that. Assassin Sid sucks. New Moon Luna is going to press S3, and of course, you could use something like, Secret Storm, where you could still S3 with Closer Charles after that. But if you're unbuffable and you're sealed, or if something can push you back, this doesn't really do anything specifically for Closer Charles. This first turn, like evasion thing, honestly, will have to be paired alongside either immunity or a barrier if you want to try and cheese a certain character, or if you want to try and cheese someone like ML Politis. But otherwise, this is honestly a decent buff, but nowhere near as insane the change that I thought they would have given to him. Now, if he gained evasion at all times, like if they just built it into his kit, then okay, but This still feels a little bit weird because I don't think this like breaks someone like Closer Charles. And even though they've also increased or they changed the parameters of his CR push to now be if the enemy's health is less than 40%, uh, none of this, in my opinion, kind of elevates him into a wow, now he's an insane cleave lineup sort of character. That being said, of course, you could be using him personally in something like Arena or Guild War, any setup where you want to try and force someone like Closer Charles to be effective. I'm sure you can, but for what I'm seeing right now, Closer Charles is still the same. Archdemon Shadow is also honestly a character who kind of rounds out this Moonlight section, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but in terms of what we're being given for Archdemon Shadow, now her S1 just has a 100% chance in general to seal the enemy for 2 turns, and the Soulburn effect now only ignores effect resistance with its effect. Formerly, it increased the chance to 100% and ignored ER, which was nice, but when you didn't have souls, it kind of made it feel a little bit unreliable. But now you have a 100% chance, well, you know, assuming no resist and assuming no 15%, you have a guaranteed chance to, well, seal the enemy. Now, additionally, they also increase the amount of damage that, you know, the Twisted Power also does, which is the S2 effect. But honestly, the new effect or the new condition for it that's been added is also pretty cool. What it reads is that instead of after using Touch of Chaos having a 40% chance to activate Burst effect and it being doubled when the target is sealed, after using a basic skill when the target is sealed, increases the attack of the caster for 1 turn before activating Burst. Now you'll notice there is no percentage in there. So it does mean, of course, that this is a bit more of a consistent character now. So if you're using a basic with Archdemon and assuming that the target is sealed, you increase the damage of your character by giving yourself an attack buff, but you also activate Burst. Now, additionally, the burst damage, or in addition to being given the burst damage or the, let me restate that. Although she is being given the attack increase, her burst damage is actually being decreased. In addition to having the blind chance removed from this S2, which does kind of make this more of a damage dealing kind of seal only kind of character. I know I just mentioned that the burst damage on this has been increased, which I'm assuming it has to be since you're being given an attack buff for free. However, even if that's not the case, just being given the ability to use her S3 with an attack increase, assuming that you manage to use burst or activate her S2, does make the new S3, which now gives you an 80% chance to decrease defense for 2 turns, quite impactful alongside, well, probably, landing a bunch of debuffs or debuffing the enemy team. Now, what this basically means for the Moonlight or Archdemon specifically is that, well, she's less RNG-y. However, now she's more slated to be more of a DPS. Now, we'll see to what extent this will be super impactful. I do think that the idea of having a DPS that kind of survives quite well while also being able to, well, seal all the time sounds cool in theory, until you start adding characters like Ilanov and things like Last Rider Crow and Laya into the fray, which is kind of the reason why Archdemon isn't even that effective or that good anymore. But in addition to this, we have to talk about all the Moonlights that we just took a look at. Now, I'll be honest, the characters that they touched were cool. Like, the fact that they decided to change these characters are, well, it's something that I appreciate. But truth be told, I don't think this is enough to kind of push almost any of these characters back into a usable state. Assuming that you are able to ban out things, or if you play a certain draft, I certainly agree that you could, I guess, find a sort of position where this could work. But Pirate Captain Flan taking a little bit less damage, having the hunt thing is, I guess, nice with Afternoon Soak Flan in a sense, but these are not like ML Politis or New Moon Luna or even like Knockwall, Laya, any of these sort of character level sort of picks, which is a little bit interesting considering they're all Moonlight characters. Like Moonlight characters back in the day, at least in 2021, 2022, 2023, if you picked a Moonlight character, if you got a Moonlight character, you were either expecting them to be buffed and be the new flavor of the month and be super OP for a while, or you'd expect everyone to start spamming them. But these feel a little bit different, primarily because although they are the less used characters, including Closer Charles, I don't know to what extent these buffs will actually change them into being used. However, I'm more than happy to admit that I'm wrong or to be proven wrong when people end up using them, assuming that we find a draft that involves or works alongside these characters. Now, again, with the Moonlight section out, I think the changes happening are cool, amazing. However, maybe you could have added a little bit more love to it. Who knows? But now we got to talk about the Covenant 5 stars. The first character we want to talk about is Eligos, and guys, this is honestly pretty crazy. Now, they've basically kind of doubled down on this character, but we'll have to start with Cloak and Trigger his S3 first. What this skill now does is that formerly it used to give you critical, or it gives you hit chance for 2 turns and then attacks the enemy, so you were more guaranteed to, land on characters like Aiden. But because Aiden and these characters are no longer nearly as impactful, he needs a new function. Now, they didn't get rid of his hit chance, to be clear. Don't be afraid. But now what he has is an inflict resource reduction on a target by 60%, while also increasing the combat readiness of the caster by 50%. Now, this is obviously pretty cool because now he gains essentially half an extra turn, or if he's an opener, almost a full turn, depending on who you push back. But the resource reduction is honestly pretty impactful, just because, well, you get to push back someone like, Abyssal Yufine, or you can push back maybe someone like Navy Captain Landy, depending on who you're hitting. Whoever the character is that you're trying to resource reduce, this is pretty impactful, in addition to being given an extra turn, or almost an extra turn. The only thing is, though, is that now with the cleaner, they've moved the hit chance buff from the S3 to the S2, which is like, thank God, finally. But also they're giving him 50% crit damage just for existing, which is really nice if you're a cleave player. But follow along, because now it says whenever an ally except for the caster defeats an enemy, you activate Time Bomb against an enemy with the lowest health, which also has been changed. Apologies, this is a lot to get into one word. But now Time Bomb grants you Gab, or greater attack buff, to the caster for 2 turns. And you could probably imagine what giving someone attack buff or greater attack buff does. But then they also changed the damage of the bomb to scale proportional to the caster's speed. So now if you're a Ran gear holder and you want to give it to your Eligos, not only is it almost impossible for him to miss in 99% of cases, he also deals insane damage. And if you can kill someone or line up a kill in any way, shape, or form, like maybe run Eligos and Sid, now you're going to deal presumably an insane amount of damage with the Time Bomb S2. Additionally, though, with the S1, they now made it so that the dual attack is only assuming that the caster has attack buff or a greater attack buff in order to activate. While this is, greater attack buff by itself is a little bit scary, or in order for you to have greater attack buff, the only way for you to do it in this case would be either by having Wall of Order or by, using Time Bomb. It does still mean that, assuming that you are able to get off Time Bomb, you'll have no problem activating the dual attack. However, that does mean, on the flip side, that you have to activate Time Bomb in order to get the greater attack buff, because that's the condition for the dual attack. But assuming that, again, you pair someone like Eligos with maybe a Sid, a New Moon Luna S2, anything like this, Eligos is looking pretty freaky. Honestly, I'm a big fan, and I get it. Some players will say, oh my god, Willie's not fast enough and stuff. Well, guys, remember, if you take a look at the EE, again, he does have stealth, which they've also buffed to now be for 2 turns, thank God. But in addition to this, they also offered one more EE change, which is now, rather than reduce the cooldown of his S3, now you can increase the damage of the Time Bomb and also attack the enemy with the highest attack, which is Selene leaning or Selene feeling. But truth be told, when you're a cleaver, I don't know for sure if you want to kill the lowest health or the highest attack target every time. It kind of feels like it depends on what cleave you're running. But I think being offered these 2 EEs is really cool. However, I think in a 99% of cases, if you want to run something like Guiding Light, that's viable. If you want to run this EE, that's also viable. So feel free to do what you want. But I think Eligos back on the map. Looks pretty cool. I'm excited to try cleaving with him. Now, the next character we have is Chloe. And Chloe's changes definitely feel more PvE oriented, but I don't know to what extent people are really going to use this character regardless, even though it does kind of look like they've added a lot of love to her. Now, the first thing that they've done is they increase, or they self-increase her attack for 3 turns. 3-turn attack buff, by the way, is pretty crazy. And you know that this character is dedicated for PvE by the fact that they made it 3 turns and she self-buffs herself, right? Whatever. But as you're seeing here, they also made it so now, or they changed Nail rather, so that when attacked, you inflict additional damage proportional to the attacker's attack, which does make you know, maybe make her more of a Hwa-Young-esque character, but given that she can still crit, this feels a little bit weird. And one of the things that I'm not a huge fan about, you know, or I'm not a huge fan of this additional damage proportional thing, specifically on characters that aren't forced into the all attack kind of scaling, specifically because the scaling on this thing basically has to be significant enough to justify going all into attack instead of crit rate and crit damage. And otherwise, even if you're running someone like Chloe base speed, which is what I'm assuming if, you know, this is used for PvE, people are going to be building her with, the actual additional damage that you deal is not that significant. And honestly, if you guys are familiar with what Chloe's best purpose is right now, it's basically being used to, well, S3, like, you know, it's basically to put the nail on, you know, the Banshee and then one shot immediately after. This does, however, and the change to Chloe does, however, make me think maybe the next rift or one of the new rifts may use her, or some new content that they add will use her in some way, shape, or form, which would be cool. But also, as you're seeing with the Hyper Strike, what it reads now is that when the enemy is inflicted with Hyper Nail, you ignore ER. Which is like, okay, you get to stun the enemy, and that's cool. And I guess maybe if you want to use certain fights, or if you want to use this for like certain PvP fights, you could use this. But let's just read instead what they give us for the description for why they buff Chloe. Chloe is now said to, well, be adjusted to make better use of Magic Nail. And it reads, first, the effect of Magic Nail will be changed, blah, 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 to, you know, the attack. And this allows allies with high attack to deal, wait. Eh? Oh, I misread this. I apologize. This is an audible. I was originally thinking that this was going to be like just based off of Chloe's attack, but this is actually, since it's a debuff, anyone that uses attack with this actually deals more damage with Nail. That changes things, because with the new Hwa-Young, this looks pretty cool, pretty exciting, and I'm actually a big fan. But wow, okay, let's continue reading. Magic Nail will additionally increase the attack of the caster before attacking. Hyper Strike has the burst damage or the base damage reduced, but will now ignore ER when used on targets with Magic Nail. Chloe will no longer need to focus on effectiveness and can easily inflict debuffs on enemies with high effect resistance using Magic Nail. This, of course, doesn't include her need to obviously strip, or, you know, if people have immunities, which most of them do nowadays with the Lacerated Crow and Meteor Coward running around. These are characters that honestly do need to be paired with other characters, like maybe a Briar, maybe an, whatever it is, an ML Politics or a New Moon Luna, in order for you to actually strip. But I misread it. I apologize. The Magic Nail for the first time. That could be pretty interesting. If you end up running someone with high attack, I'm curious to what extent you'll be able to pop something like that. But at the end of the day, guys, keep in mind and remember again that you are playing with Chloe. So even if you do get Magic Nail and you're guaranteed to land it, unless if the damage is insane, which again, they've nerfed the damage of Hyper Strike, we'll have to see to what extent this is insane or how good this is. Though she does ignore ER, stun an enemy, assuming that you, again, have Magic Nail on them. Could be kind of cool. Now, they did also change her EEs with this, including increasing the combat readiness of the caster when using Heavy Strike. They also increased, they increased the damage dealt of Hyper Strike. In addition, they also... Did they always have a defense break? It's been so long since I've used Chloe, I didn't even realize that she had it formerly, but what I was going to say is now she has an 85% chance to decrease defense for 2 turns, which is really cool, of course, and because now you have something like, again, you have a, excuse me, a defense break and a stun on 1 turn that's ignore ER. And I was going to say that, like, the main disadvantage to this is that, well, you know, it still kind of feels like Rand, but I didn't even realize she had this before. I apologize, guys. You can maybe take this whole Chloe section with a grain of salt. I guess I haven't even played Chloe in a while to even understand this. However, keep in mind again that the decreased defense in general kind of, when it's 85%, since it's not guaranteed to ignore ER, which again, I understand why they're doing this because it'd be a little bit unbalanced to have it 100% and also have a 2-turn defense break and also have it be ignore ER. If you're trying to use this for something like PvE, you'll probably tear your hair out if you try to guarantee like a defense break in the sense. But having the ignore ER is pretty cool, especially if you want to use her in some sort of, debuff sort of composition, or if you're trying to one-shot something, especially in Guild War and Arena. But this is kind of a PvE unit. The next character that they've adjusted is Yufine, and she kind of feels similar to Chloe in the sense that she has like one specific purpose, but everyone kind of forgot about her. And now what they've done is, well, they've given her a change to her S2. And now what her S2 does is it, number one, has its soul burn effect to change, and now it's an ignore ER. But now it has an, assuming or presumably, I don't know if this is like a typo, if this is only a 70% chance to defense break for 2 turns, or if there's going to be an upgrade to this that increases it to 85, but it's 70 for what we're seeing right now, which is kind of an interesting number for defense breaks. But now this is a 70% ignore ER and 85% chance stun or silence for 1 turn. I don't honestly know to what extent this is going to be super amazing, honestly, just because it feels like the extra turn allowed you to activate certain characters like Commander Pavel, and while they're moving away from this, you'd think that the alternative that you get would be better, and I guess a Dispel into Defense Break and Silence sounds pretty goofy, all while being Ignore ER, but given that Yufine is kind of a character that of course still has to deal with stuff like hit chance and can't hit characters like Afternoon Soak Flan, of who is, one of the most popular characters in the game. We'll see how good this specifically is, but that's not the only thing that they've given her, because formerly her S2 gave her attack and defense buff, but now it's been changed to her S3, where now she increases her attack for 2 turns, and once you actually kill someone with the S3, you're granted the extra turn here. Now, I don't know to what extent this is supposed to kind of work out, because again, it would sound like you would want to, S2 into S3, but now that's not quite the case, and I don't quite understand what they were, what the tuning of this is trying to be. It feels a little bit weird, but I guess because everyone's supposed to be stripped, defense broken, and silenced, you're presumably supposed to be able to line that up for either an S2 into then an S3, or you're supposed to pair her with something like an Auxiliary Lots. Rest in peace, by the way, to our boy. But now, reading on the S3, again, you have the extra turn, but also when the target has a debuff, you increase the damage dealt. Now, it does kind of feel like, this is something that, I don't know, it feels like they're basically changing her to be like Jacko. Formerly, it was assuming that I believe that there was like a silence. Not only did you have defense pen, you also got pushed up, which is what she still has. She does still have the combat readiness push, but now it's more flexible, and it's any time that the enemy has a debuff, she gains pushed, which is again kind of similar to what Jacko has. But now, because they've removed again like the defense pen, and because they've also, made it so that she has to use her S3 or like her S2, then wait and then use her S3. It feels kind of weird. I don't really understand the idea behind this. Again, Yufine is a character, in my opinion, that you're supposed to use, or you would use for like an S2 into S3, like you debuff, or you have something and you line her up into use her, and using her S3 for like a big AoE or for like a big single target burst. But it's weird because she has like this S3 defense break that you would use after you kill something. So it's like, I guess on the target that maybe like a Zeo or like a Ran were to S3 on first, she'll kill 1 target, gain the extra turn, and then she Soulburn ignores and sets up another character to defense break or to hit on defense breaks, which is, I guess, an interesting concept. But whatever the case is, it's a 70% chance to defense break, and it's also an 85% chance to silence. So it's like, you're working with a lot of weird odds here. I don't exactly know what they're going with here, but it is what it is. Yufine was honestly not used formally anyways, so cool. I'm going to just read out exactly, formally for what I did too. Just read out what they described as the intended change for this, just so you have context. And what it says is that Yufine will be adjusted to become more versatile in various situations. I mean, that's kind of true. She does appear to have more uses, or more uses than zero, which is what she had before. But now she increases combat readiness when the target has a debuff instead of being silenced. Yes, now she's more like Jacko. And additionally, the addition for increased damage. Wait. Increased damage. Okay, I don't actually. Now that I think about it, maybe the reason why they described this as the change from penetration defense instead of, or maybe the reason why they changed the defense pen to this is so that you could use this against someone like Ilanov, which is okay, I guess, but like defense pen when you're not fighting against Ilanov is still pretty OP, by the way. Just saying. But anyways, they changed it. They changed the condition to now, be bonus damage, and you will increase damage or gain the increased damage whenever you hit anyone that's debuffed. And now you have the extra turn from the defeating of an ally or the defeating of an enemy as opposed to a soul burn. Now, or it says here, while the skill's defense penetration effect will be replaced with damage increase, the ease conditions will result in slightly lower damage compared to before, which is, again, what I'm assuming they intended, because she defense breaks. And, well, again, I'm assuming they're trying to plan out someone like Yufine to be potentially used in a meta that includes characters like Ilanov. Now, they do also mention that the attack increase, granted, will be used upon her S3 now instead of S2, which makes it easier for Yufine to one-shot enemies. Okay. But also, the defense buff will be replaced with the defense break, which makes sense because Yufine wasn't really using this anyways. However, honestly, all of what they said, including this mention of the change to critical hit chance on her imprint concentration, still makes her an interesting but kind of like a unique niche kind of character. Again, I understand where they're coming from. Like, yeah, we want to make, a defense break, or we want to give her a defense break instead of defense buff. And we also want to, I guess, change the condition of her damage. But overall, if you reduced her damage and you also got rid of her soul burn, and the only thing that you could do is maybe make it a little bit easier for her to take a turn, it's like, like, what are we talking about, right? Like any debuff. So, okay, so now instead of us being able to play, like, pair someone like Yufine with Zio, who's still one of the best, cleave setups in the game, we can use her with Briar, who's already using Renewed Will. Feels a little bit odd. I don't really know to what extent they've really thought out this Yufine change. Again, more than happy to be proven wrong. I think that Eligos, though, feels a little bit better in terms of being a cleave setup character. And honestly, I don't think Yufine is going to be like this cleave saver to kind of get us out of this Ilanov, Abyssal Yufine rut. The final character that is being changed is Sinful Angelica. And honestly, this is the character that I'm most excited for. Basically, what you're seeing right now is that Sinful Angelica is a character that can be used to block revives. But the thing is that, well, they can only not revive so long as she has, well, her S2 or her S3 up, the immortality. However, now she's being buffed so that while she's alive, enemies just can't revive, which is way better in my opinion, because now you could do something like, run her high bulk, or have her run like, potion vial or something like that. And so long as she's able to use her immortality at some point, you don't need like infinite ER, and you don't have to worry about the immortality being stripped. You just have to survive, basically. Now, additionally, I will say, the big thing about here, or the big change that they also added, is that she has defense break now on S1, which is like, wow, amazing, by the way. Insane for Wyvern 13, if anyone's even still doing Wyvern 13 one-shots, by the way. But additionally, when you soul burn, you have a 100% chance to defense break the target for 2 turns. Fantastic, by the way. Insane change. But in addition to this, she now also dispels 2 debuffs from all allies when she presses her S3. I suspect a lot of people are now going to be using Sinful Angelica, to be honest. If not in RTA, certainly in Arena, certainly in Guild Wars. Now, just because she dispels 2 debuffs from all allies, like, no one can revive while you're on the team. You have a defense break with S1. You're literally just going to use this with Afternoon Soak Flan, and you're going to one-shot pretty much everyone on the team. I can't imagine a world where Sinful Angelica doesn't end up being one of the most popular characters now, with someone like Afternoon Soak Flan. But that being said, again, if you just kill the Sinful Angelica, you know, like it doesn't, the soul harvest thing doesn't prevent her from being killed. It just means that, well, now so long as she's alive, as opposed to, being stripped, she'll prevent enemies from reviving. Now, keep in mind as well, this is not an extinction. This is only a prevention of being revived. So as with all gameplay kind of counters, Sinful Angelica can still kind of be worked around. If you just kill the Sinful Angelica, you could then revive or save the Ruel revive for after that. But given that, again, you have the dispel debuffs, which may allow you in certain cases to prevent yourself from being debuffed by something like Harsetti, or even maybe be used alongside something like Eternus to counter New Moon Luna, this is actually kind of a pretty cool change. Now, the last thing we need to talk about is the artifact changes, and honestly, these are artifacts that kind of need a little bit of love or more of an identity shift. But take a look at this. This is Sigurd Sight's chains, and for Sigurd Sight specifically, now instead of only having the attack increase when you're below a certain amount of health, they reduce the amount of attack that you gain, and now it scales depending on level. But also, it's been reduced at its maximum cost or its maximum potential from 25 to 20. However, the attack is now unconditional. Now, the thing is, though, is that when you do end up using something like Sigurd Scythe, you are using it primarily for the attack increase. So the 5% damage may hit or hurt a little bit. However, the fact that you now gain it no matter what does kind of put it in line in terms of power value to something like, Golden Rose or Pipette Lance. But honestly, Pipette Lance is a collab artifact, but it is really good, though, for the characters that you want to use it on, including who I imagine that's probably a character I will probably imagine or I think Hua Young will be someone that will probably have to debate between using something like new Sigurd Scythe and Pipette Lance, but I think a lot of players will probably just use Pipette Lance if they're not using Shaltier, that's her name. However, at the end of the day, guys, I think that the Sigurd Scythe change is cool. It's interesting. If you're using someone like Ed on this, I think Ed could definitely appreciate this, especially because he's someone that doesn't always get down to that low health threshold at first. He sometimes uses his S3 to nuke first. Interesting. Not a huge fan of the loss in attack. I don't think Sigurd Scythe would be OP if you just leave it at 25% attack, but whatever. And then they also changed Eligos' artifact to now reading that after attacking with a single attack, when the target receives damage equal to 50% or more health, there's a 100% chance to increase combat readiness of all allies by 15%. This is kind of like an interesting EE, to what extent you'll actually be using something like this is really tough to say. This is more of a damage artifact, and I can maybe see something like an offer you can't refuse being used with someone like Afternoon Soak Flan if you don't have her artifact. But I mean, guys, the attack increase is just so insane, and even if you're really, really, really gunning for like this combat readiness increase, you only get it once per turn. And again, I understand that being given maybe 35% CR is really interesting, but that's also assuming that you deal 50% or more of their health in one hit. Additionally, of course, you are playing with Afternoon Soak Flan, so whether or not you'll actually want to use a character like Afternoon Soak Flan without having an attack buff prior is kind of, there's too many moving pieces, I'd say personally. I think that Eligos' artifact is really cool, though, and does open up a number of opportunities. Maybe someone will use, I don't know, like a combination like Eligos with Afternoon Soak Flan and these other characters, Sid, to kind of make things pop off. But guys, these were all the changes that they added to the balance patch. Honestly, I do think that they hit a lot of characters that needed help. Whether or not they actually got changed in a meaningful way, though, is kind of up for you to say. Not a huge fan of the Yufine changes. It feels like it's a little odd. Again, I know that they want to move away from her being a defense pen character for whatever reason, but even the flow of her kit, in my opinion, doesn't really make too much sense. I honestly suspect that they'll go back and change Yufine again when inevitably people don't use her quite as much, is my guess, is my prediction. If I'm wrong, again, it is what it is. But I do think that Sinful Angelica change, amazing. Big fan of Eligos. Kind kind of interested in how Chloe will end up panning. Originally, I just thought that she was going to be like an attack-based character now, but the nail increasing or basically providing drink to any character that hits a character with nail, in addition to defense break and the stun, is pretty cool. And honestly, these 3 characters being changed, the Moonlights, their changes seem a little weird. However, assuming that you don't, I guess, deal with any of the other meta ML5s like Ilanov or Last Ride of Crow or something, maybe Archdemon is cool. I don't know, though. Honestly, Archdemon is already kind of hard countered by Last Ride of Crow. I don't know how they're even going to get past that. But yeah, Closest Charles, kind of whatever. I guess if you don't want to die to like Ran or a Zeo S3, kind of cool. Pirate Captain Flan, like a moderate increased quality of life buff, I'd say. I mean, you know, the S1 stealing buff, you take a little bit less damage. More Afternoon Soak Flan pairing. Everyone wants to play Afternoon Soak Flan, basically, is what I'm seeing with this patch. Anyways, guys, overall, I'd say it's maybe a 7.5, maybe at an 8 to 10 patch. And yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Hope you learned something from today's video. Good night.